Mr. Secretary, always great to have you on. It does seem to be a critical time for Ukrainian forces around Bakhmut after so many months of fighting to take control of that area. How much of a political prize is this for Russia if they can seize this part of Ukraine?
Well, there's no question that there's a psychological impact when the Russians are able to gain anything in the Ukraine these days. I'm not sure it's that important a strategic military target because it's been destroyed by the Russians and turned into ashes. And so I understand the game of trying to gain any territory you can. But I think this is more of a preliminary step for both sides in terms of getting ready for the next chapter in this war, which is going to involve some serious offensives on both sides, not just Russia, but I think Ukraine will conduct an offensive. And I think it's going to be a critical moment that will tell us a lot about the future of this war.
Absolutely. And let's talk about China. Came up a lot on the Sunday talk shows earlier today. And I have to ask you this, in a draft budget report released this morning, China unveiled its annual military budget for this year, which shows an increase of just over 7% to roughly $224 billion. China keeps ramping things up on the military front. How much of a concern does this need to be for the intelligence community, for the Pentagon, moving forward, do you think?
Well, we have to pay attention to what China is doing. Obviously, China is not just a competitor in the world, but in many ways they're an adversary in the world. And we have to pay attention to the amount of money they're putting into defense, into space, what they're doing in terms of militarizing the South China Sea, their threats to Taiwan. So it is of concern. And our intelligence officials, our military officials, have to constantly analyze what steps China is taking in order to be prepared to counter whatever they do. Look, the only way to deal with China is from strength. So it's very important that the United States make very clear where the lines are in terms of Taiwan, in terms of the South China Sea, in terms of just their defense buildup and where it should go. Ultimately, you would hope that we could reestablish some kind of dialogue with China, but we're not there yet, and I suspect we're probably going to go through a very tense period in our relationship before, hopefully, we're able to talk to one another.
And I hate to ask you about politics, but let me do that. Former President Donald Trump, as you know, just won the very unscientific CPAC straw poll. Need to emphasize it's unscientific. But he is leading in just about all of the polls on the Republican side right now. And I know it is very early in the process. But I have to ask you, what message would it send to the world if Trump were to somehow get back into the White House? You are, in addition to being a wise elder when it comes to national security and intelligence matters, you know this game as well as just about anybody, former White House Chief of Staff and so on. Do you think Trump could do it again? And what does that say to the world, that he's even in this position right now?
Well, I don't think we should kid ourselves. I think the reality is that he has support in the Republican Party and that he could very well be the candidate for the Republican Party. I think it would be a terrible message to send to the world if, in fact, he is a candidate again for President of the United States, because I believe that his whole America First approach to foreign policy, his desire to essentially withdraw from the world in terms of a leadership position for the United States would be devastating to our foreign policy at this point in time in the 21st century. Look, in the end, I really believe that he's a loser, and that even if he gets the nomination, he will lose. But the mere fact that he would be nominated by the Republican Party would be a scary step in the 21st century.
And just a quick follow, I mean, I think it would definitely mean a big change in terms of how the U.S. deals with Ukraine.
Oh my God. You know, we've just gone through a few years where fortunately we've been able to reestablish the United States' role as a world leader. And I think President Biden basically said to the world that the United States is back, and he's kind of he's made very clear that the United States, working with our allies, are going to be unified in confronting adversaries like Putin and China, North Korea, Iran, and others. And we have to be unified in the world. Look, it's a dangerous world. It's going to require United States world leadership. And the last thing the United States needs to do is to elect somebody like Trump who doesn't want to be a world leader, who ignores the rest of the world. It would weaken the United States, and very frankly, it would be very dangerous for the world.
All right. Former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, great to see you as always, sir. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you, Jim.